I still remember the sound of my brother's voice when he told me I'd have no place in our family business. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even apologetic. He was matter of fact, like he'd already done the math and my value came up 0. Nicole stood beside him, already typing something on her phone, probably messaging the lawyer. Dad would have wanted this to stay in capable hands, Ryan said, adjusting his tie like he was already CEO. You've done great with the paperwork, really, but running a business takes different skills. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly and watched them exchange that look, that silent agreement between people who think they've already won. What they didn't know was what I'd spent the last 6 months quietly making sure of. What they never thought to ask was why Dad's business partner had been CC'd on every single email I'd sent since the funeral. 2 weeks later, they scheduled an emergency board meeting without telling me. That's when they learned that some doors close a lot faster than they open. If you're watching Charlize Warren right now, drop a comment and tell me, would you have fought back immediately or waited until they showed their cards? Growing up, I learned to be invisible in all the right ways. In my family, being noticed meant being compared. And being compared meant coming up short. My older brother Ryan was the golden child before he could walk. Star athlete, business degree from ASU, Dad's shadow at the shop every summer since he was 16. My sister Nicole was the charming one. She could talk anyone into anything, walked into marketing right out of college, brought in corporate clients Dad never dreamed of reaching. And then there was me, the youngest, the quiet one, the one who was good with numbers, the way people say someone has a great personality. I learned early that in a family of loud personalities, the best way to survive was to make yourself useful without making yourself heard. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. Martinez Auto and Tire Centers, 3 locations across the Phoenix metro area, built from nothing by my dad Carlos and his best friend Frank, holiday photos with matching company shirts. Awards from the Chamber of Commerce, customers who'd been coming to us for 20 years. Inside our house, attention flowed in one direction. When Ryan wanted to expand to a second location, Dad remortgaged our home to make it happen. When Nicole wanted to rebrand the company, they dropped $60,000 on new signage and a website redesign. When I asked if I could take some business classes at community college, Dad said, "You're already helping with the books. Why spend money on what you're already learning?" I told myself it was practical, that families work differently, that not everyone gets the same investment because not everyone has the same potential. The only person who treated me differently was Uncle Frank. He wasn't actually my uncle, just Dad's business partner and best friend since they were kids in Tucson. He'd stop by my desk at the shop's main office, ask how the reconciliation was going, actually listen when I explained a discrepancy I'd found. "Your dad doesn't see it yet," he told me once, "but you've got the sharpest eye for detail in this whole operation." I held on to that. On the days when Ryan would walk past my desk without acknowledging I existed, when Nicole would interrupt me mid-sentence to take a call, I'd remember that at least one person saw me as more than the family bookkeeper. As time went on, I became the one handling things no one else wanted to touch. Tax prep, payroll, vendor contracts, insurance claims, the tedious work that kept 3 locations running but never got mentioned at family dinners. Ryan and Nicole showed up for the big decisions, the client meetings, the ribbon cuttings. I showed up for the ordinary days, the broken AC in location 2, the employee who needed their check early, the supplier who screwed up an order. I didn't question it. I just did what needed doing and told myself I was part of something bigger. Then Dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, too far gone by the time they caught it. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Those were the hardest months of my life, but also the clearest. Because when someone's dying, you see who actually shows up. Ryan visited every other week, always with updates about keeping the business stable, keeping clients confident. Nicole came on Sundays with flowers and stayed for exactly 40 minutes before needing to get back to her life. I was there most evenings after work, helping him with medications, listening to him talk about the shop, the early days, his dreams. During those months, Dad talked a lot about legacy. Not in the sentimental way people do in movies, but practically. He wanted to make sure things were protected, handled right, that nobody could mess up what he and Frank had built. He asked me to pull together all the corporate documents, the partnership agreements, the property deeds. Said he wanted everything organized, clean, no loose ends. I thought he was just being thorough. I didn't realize he was being strategic. 3 days before he died, Dad asked me to bring Frank to the hospital. They talked alone for an hour. When Frank left, his eyes were red, but he nodded at me in a way that felt significant. I didn't ask. Dad was tired, and I figured they were just saying goodbye. At the funeral, Ryan and Nicole took the front row. They greeted everyone, accepted condolences like they were the only ones who'd lost something. I stood to the side, making sure the catering was set up right, that the photo boards were stable, that someone was directing parking. That's when the questions started, quiet at first. "So, what's happening with the business?" Nicole asked one evening, 2 weeks after the funeral, her tone casual while she sorted through Dad's files. "Have you looked at the ownership documents?" A few days later, Ryan stopped by the office. Frank mentioned something about updating the partnership agreement. "You know anything about that?" I told them I'd been organizing paperwork, getting everything ready for the lawyer to review. They seemed satisfied with that answer. But then the visits became more frequent, the questions more specific. Nicole started showing up at the main shop during business hours, chatting with Frank, asking about shares and voting rights. Ryan began CCing himself on emails with our attorney. "We need to talk about succession planning," Ryan announced one Sunday at Mom's house. "Dad wouldn't want the business to get complicated. Clean transitions matter." Nicole nodded. "You've been such a help with the administrative stuff, Maddie. But operations, client relations, strategic growth that requires different expertise." Mom stayed quiet, picking at her food. She'd checked out the moment Dad got sick, and she hadn't really come back. I felt it then, that familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I got every time I was about to be talked over, moved aside, made smaller to accommodate someone else's ambition. But this time, something else was there too. A memory. 2 years earlier, I'd watched Ryan convince Dad to make him operations manager, then systematically push out the shop manager who'd been there for 15 years. I watched him explain away the severance package we'd promised. I watched him smile while he did it. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and replayed every conversation since the funeral. The timing, the questions, the sudden interest in documents they'd never cared about before, Nicole's casual mention of bringing in a real CFO, Ryan's comment about family legacy versus family burden. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like positioning. The next morning, I called Frank. "Can we meet? Just you and me. Somewhere quiet." We met at a diner 40 minutes outside Phoenix, the kind of place where nobody from our world would accidentally run into us. I brought coffee. He brought a folder. "Your dad knew," Frank said before I could ask anything. "He saw how they treated you, how they'd always treated you. He didn't want to believe it was as bad as I told him. But those last few weeks in the hospital, he saw it himself." He slid the folder across the table. Inside were amended corporate documents, dated 3 months before Dad died. Transfer of shares, new ownership structure, board resolutions. "You own 51% of Martinez Auto Tire," Frank said quietly. "Your dad transferred it 6 weeks before he passed. Ryan and Nicole each have 20%. I kept my 9%. It's already filed with the state, already executed. They just don't know it yet." I stared at the papers. My name. My signature from a meeting I barely remembered. Dad saying we were updating insurance beneficiaries. "Why didn't he tell them?" I asked. Frank's jaw tightened. "Because he wanted to see what they'd do. He hoped they'd surprise him. They didn't." He explained everything. The legal structure, the irrevocable nature of the transfer, the protective clauses Dad and the lawyers had built in. Even if I wanted to give shares away, I'd need board approval. Even if someone claimed I was incompetent, the trust provisions would kick in. Dad had learned from watching other family businesses tear themselves apart. He'd made sure this one couldn't. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You wait," Frank said. "Let them make their move. They will, and when they do, you'll already be 3 steps ahead." I didn't tell Ryan. I didn't tell Nicole. I didn't change my routine or my tone. I kept filing paperwork, kept answering their questions with the same vague helpfulness I always had. When Nicole asked if I'd found Dad's updated will, I said the lawyers were still reviewing everything. When Ryan mentioned getting the ownership situation sorted, I nodded and said we should definitely schedule something soon. They thought I was agreeing. I was buying time, because I knew what Frank knew. If they thought I was still the same quiet little sister who'd always stepped aside, they'd get comfortable. They'd overplay their hand, and that's exactly what I needed them to do. Their confidence was my advantage. Their assumptions were my weapon. I just had to wait for them to pull the trigger. 2 weeks later, Nicole called me. "Ryan and I scheduled a board meeting for Wednesday. 10 a.m. We need to formalize Dad's succession plan." Frank's aware. "It's just administrative." My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed steady. "Okay, I'll be there." "Actually," she said, voice smooth, "this is more about operations and strategy. You don't need to sit through all the corporate stuff. We'll catch you up after." There it was, the move I'd been waiting for. the dismissal that confirmed everything. I think I should be there, I said carefully. Dad always wanted me involved in the business side. Silence. Then, of course, sure, 10 a.m. But I heard it. The irritation. The plan interrupted. Wednesday morning, I arrived at the main shop's conference room at 9:45. Frank was already there, face carefully neutral. Ryan and Nicole walked in at 9:58, both dressed like they were closing a merger. Ryan carried a leather portfolio. Nicole had a stack of printed presentations. They looked surprised to see me but recovered quickly. Great, we're all here, Ryan said, taking the head of the table like it was already his. Let's make this quick. Nicole and I have been reviewing the business structure, and we think the smartest move is to formalize leadership before things get complicated. Nicole clicked her presentation remote. A slide appeared. Martinez Auto Tire, strategic restructuring proposal. Given Dad's passing, we need clear operational authority, she continued. Ryan as CEO, me as COO, and we bring in a professional CFO to handle finances. Maddie, you've been wonderful with the day-to-day admin, but scaling requires specialized expertise. Ryan nodded. We've already spoken with candidates. Top-tier people. This protects everyone's interests. They kept talking. Equity structure, voting rights, proposed buyout of non-operational shareholders. Every word designed to sound reasonable while stripping me of any real power. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. Frank sat perfectly still beside me. Finally, Ryan slid papers across the table. This formalizes everything. Clean transition. You'd still get distributions, Maddie, but operational decisions would go through proper channels. I looked at the documents. They'd forged Dad's signature on a resolution that predated his death. Not well, but enough that someone not paying attention might miss it. Nicole leaned forward, voice gentle. We know this is a lot, but Dad would want what's best for the business. You understand that, right? I met her eyes. I do understand. I understand exactly what you're trying to do. Ryan's expression flickered. We're trying to honor Dad's legacy. By forging his signature, the room went silent. That's Nicole started. Dated April 9th, I said, pointing at the document. Dad was hospitalized April 4th. He didn't sign anything after April 1st. I have the medical records if you'd like to compare. Ryan's face went red. This is a legitimate succession plan, based on documents that don't exist, Frank said quietly, speaking for the first time. And it doesn't matter anyway. He pulled out his own folder, placed it in the center of the table. Carlos transferred ownership 6 months ago, Frank said. Maddie owns 51% of this company. Everything you're proposing requires majority shareholder approval. She is that majority. Nicole grabbed the papers, hands shaking. That's not possible. We would have been notified. You were, I said softly. It was filed with the state. Public record. You just never thought to check, because you assumed I didn't matter. Ryan stood up fast enough that his chair hit the wall. This is bullshit. Dad wouldn't. Dad did, Frank said. He spent 3 months with 2 different attorneys making sure it was ironclad. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he knew exactly why he was doing it. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was loud with everything they couldn't say. Every assumption crumbling. Every plan dissolving. Nicole's voice came out thin. You manipulated him. While he was sick. I showed up, I said, standing now too. Every night. Every hard conversation. Every moment you two were too busy planning your takeover to actually be there. I didn't manipulate anyone. I was just there when it mattered. Ryan's hands were fists. You really think you can run this business? I've been running half of it for 5 years, I said evenly. The half neither of you wanted to deal with. Payroll. Compliance. Vendor relations. Every system you took for granted, I built. Every crisis you never heard about, I handled. So yes, I think I can run it. The question is whether you two can work for someone you've spent your whole lives looking down on. Nicole's face went white. Ryan looked like he wanted to throw something. This isn't over, Ryan said. Yes, Frank said quietly. It is. The documents are filed. The transfer is irrevocable. You can contest it if you want, but you'll lose, and you'll lose your 20% in the process. Those were the terms Carlos set. Challenge the structure, forfeit your shares. I watched them process that. The trap Dad had built. The choice they didn't really have. You can stay, I said. Keep your positions. Keep your shares. Work with me, not against me. Or you can leave, and I'll buy you out at fair market value. But what you can't do is take what isn't yours. They left without another word. No slam doors. No dramatic exits. Just a quiet retreat that felt louder than shouting. Frank and I sat in that conference room for a long time after they left. He wanted you to have this, Frank said finally. Not because you're perfect, but because you actually care about the work, not just the status. He trusted you. That's not manipulation. That's recognition. The fallout happened slowly after that. Ryan stayed for 3 weeks, working silently, before accepting a buyout and leaving to start his own shop across town. Nicole lasted 2 months, growing more bitter each day, before taking a marketing job in California. Some extended family called, angry on their behalf. Others reached out privately to apologize, to admit they'd seen the favoritism for years, and never said anything. Mom stayed neutral in a way that hurt worse than taking sides. But the business stabilized. Without the power struggles, without the constant jockeying for position, we actually got better. I promoted the senior mechanic Ryan had pushed out. I restructured our pay scale to be more equitable. I started bringing the team into decisions that affected them. Frank became chairman. I became CEO. And together, we grew Dad's legacy in ways he'd only started to dream about. I walk through the shops now, all 3 locations, and every employee knows my name. Not because I'm the boss, but because I know theirs. I know about Marcus's daughter starting college. I know about Sophia's mom's surgery. I know because I show up for the ordinary days, not just the celebrations. Life didn't become perfect after that board meeting. I still get angry sometimes, thinking about the years I spent being small to make room for people who never valued me. I still wonder what would have happened if Dad hadn't seen through them in time. But I don't waste energy on reconciliation that won't come. Ryan and Nicole made their choices. They chose to see me as less than. They chose to try to take, rather than build together. Those were their choices, not mine. I learned that quiet doesn't mean weak. That knowing your worth doesn't require shouting. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you while you build something they can't touch. My dad gave me more than a business. He gave me proof that at least one person saw me clearly. That mattered more than the shares, more than the control, more than anything. I'm not the golden child. I'm not the charming one. I'm the one who showed up and did the work nobody else wanted to do, and it turned out that mattered most. If you've ever been made to feel like you're not enough, like your contributions don't count, like you should be grateful for scraps while others feast, know this. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't need to shrink to make others comfortable. And you don't owe loyalty to people who only see you as useful when you're invisible. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Protecting what's yours isn't selfish. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the first real choice you've ever made. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe to Charlize Warren. More stories are coming, and the next one might sound a lot like yours.